Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're here to speak about the CPSIA compliance and achieving a children's product certificate to sell in the US. We're absolutely thrilled today to be joined by two guest speakers from the US Consumer Product Safety Commission, Steve and Carolyn. We've also got Carlos from our Spanish office, who's joining us today to share a bit more about the testing and certification specifics and introduce HKTS and how we might be able to help you achieve the CPC and comply with CPSIA regulations as well. I might just start with a quick introduction to Steve and Carolyn, who will be kicking off this webinar with their slide deck. So just very briefly, we're joined here by firstly, Steve Williams, the International Program Manager. Steve Williams has joined the US CPSC in December 2014. He served as the International Program Manager, and currently he works as part of the team responsible for the Consumer Product Safety Commission's engagement with foreign governments and manufacturers, as well as international organizations involved in consumer product safety. We've also have the pleasure of being joined by Carolyn Manley. Carolyn is the International Program Manager of the Southeast region. And prior to joining to the Office of International Programs, she actually served as the Assistant Division Director for the Regulatory Enforcement Division in the Office of Compliance and Field Operations. Now, Mrs. Manley oversaw and managed the children's product and durable nursery products and flammability team at the US CPSC. So now I might have the both of you maybe say a quick hello and then begin sharing your presentation today.
Sure. Thank you, Anthony. So very happy to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity to join your group. Carolyn?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here as well, and I'm excited about presenting to you today. Thank you.
Okay. Is everyone seeing that okay?
Yep, that's up on my screen.
All right. So thank you again, Anthony. Before we begin, I do have a quick disclaimer that our lawyers asked us to say. Basically, this slide says that today is the start of a discussion that if you need specific advice for the legal requirements for your particular product and situation, you'll probably need to do some homework after today's session, perhaps consult us at headquarters and maybe your own legal staff as well. But we're happy to start the conversation today. Today's talk, basically, we divided into two parts. I will present very quickly an overview of CPSC. I'll talk about some of our important certification requirements, the children product certificates and the general certificates. We have several important new requirements. We wanted to highlight those just briefly because if you do manufacture or supply or sell the items, it's very important that you come up to speed on the new requirements that are in effect or will be in effect shortly. And also some e-filing aspects as well, which is a new initiative at CPSC. The second part of the conversation, the presentation, will be presented by Carolyn Manley, my colleague. She'll talk about some concrete examples of recalls and some best practices to avoid problems and to prevent a recall. To set the context, we're an independent agency in the federal government of the US. And for that, what we mean by independent is that we don't come under any ministry or department, although we do follow most of the same administrative procedures. So we're actually one of the smallest US federal agencies. We have about 500 employees, so quite small. We're actually also one of the newest. We were founded in 1972, and our makeup is basically that we have 5 commissioners who vote on product safety regulations, and at any one time, any one of them is the chair that's responsible for leading the agency. So we like to say that we're quite a small agency, but we have a very large mission. In fact, we have some 15,000 categories of consumer products that we cover. But it's a very big job, but we consider it very rewarding. I mentioned earlier in some of the earlier remarks about important new requirements. So now I'm just going to highlight very briefly some things that you want to be aware of if you're in any way involved with the manufacturer, sale, distribution, if you're an e-commerce platform. Because CPSC considers the following new requirements extremely important. We do plan aggressive enforcement activity over the next several years to make sure that there's safe products in these particular areas. So it's important to come up to speed on them. The first is furniture tip-over incidents, the new requirements that we have that are mainly related to stability. So about a year ago, because we've had a lot of incidences where young children will climb up onto drawers and the entire unit and what's on them can tip over, we've designed specific requirements to help reduce and eliminate the situation. So there's very specific requirements in terms of the weight distribution, the stability of the system, how it's designed and how it's manufactured, so that we can prevent these type of incidents. So if you're in any way involved with furniture, I think this would be something you want to hop on our website and read over in terms of these, if you're buying these for an e-commerce platform, etc. So slide 9, next slide, please. Yep, in-kind sleep products. This one, very important also. So since November 2022, it is not been legal to market products for babies to sleep in, which have an incline of 10 degrees or more. So basically, you can't sell these type of units in the US. If they're sent, they're probably going to be flagged for inspection. If they have the wrong type of angle, they'll basically not be accepted for entry to the US, and you'll probably have to destroy the units or send them back. So we really know, basically when we looked at the data, we had more than 100 babies in the US that had died of suffocation, mainly because of how these products are designed with the incline. The young babies, their necks are weak. If their chin collapsed down, they basically suffocate to death in this. So given the very high risks and the tragedy associated with it, these were banned. So unfortunately, this is a popular type of product, or was, and we still find them being sold through various e-commerce platforms, through different secondhand markets, sometimes given away by family and friends, simply because they're often not aware of the types of dangers that this type of design and product can pose. We do have an internet surveillance team that basically has flagged this for aggressive action. They monitor the internet and the platforms for the sale of these items, and we continue to take aggressive action to make sure they're removed from points of sale. Next slide, please. Toys, obviously, very important issue, very heavily regulated in the United States. The main technical regulation that we have for toys is ASTM F963. This is a very comprehensive standard that was developed by industry consensus standards, but we've adopted by reference as a regulation. The most recent version of this is F963-23, which basically came out in April 20th of 2024. And a couple key things to be aware of here. There's specific new requirements related to the accessibility of batteries, certain requirements for expanding materials, and certain for sound producing toys. All of these things are new requirements and clarifications of enhanced safety standards that if you're in any way involved with toys, you want to be sure that you're on top of. Next slide, please. Button cell and coin batteries. So in August of 2020, 2022, our Congress passed some legislation that basically instructed CPSC to regulate the use of button cell batteries. Another word that we use is coin batteries. And the intention was to reduce the number of injuries and deaths from children ingesting the tiny batteries, but they're often very powerful, and there can be very tragic, significant problems with going into gastrointestinal linings. Essentially, you can swallow a few and then they recombine, reattach in your system, and kids have had horrible injuries in the past related to that danger. So recently, we've passed a new law. It's called Reese's Law, named after a child that swallowed some button batteries, and the parents basically started a public campaign to force companies to make the batteries inaccessible to children. And in companion with that, there's very specific warning labels, and there's also performance requirements of child-resistant battery compartments. And this now is being rolled out and in effect, and it's something very important to pay attention to. And this one in particular, I mentioned warning labels. Labels for tracking, but also for warning, are one of the top reasons that goods are delayed at port. So if you don't have these type of labels, you can undergo significant expense and delays to be able to have your product enter to the US market. Next slide, please. So my last example deals with nursing pillows. These are pillows that are specifically designed to support a baby on the lap while breastfeeding. And again, it can represent a suffocation risk, a hazard. We have 150 deaths of infants in the United States that are directly correlated to suffocating in nursing pillows. And because of this, relatively recently in September 2024, the Commission issued a final regulation to establish an enhanced safety regulation for nursing pillows. So there's certain things that, in terms of the design and the content, have been done to help significantly reduce the likelihood of suffocation. And the regulation has just become final, will be going into effect in spring of 2025. And if you're selling these on a platform or manufacturing them, again, it's an item that you want to be aware of. Next slide, please. So the next section I'm going to talk about is the certification of products. I'm going to try here just to highlight some key things from CPSC's perspective. Some of the details I'm going to hold off on because Carlos will be giving his perspective from the lab, and he is working daily with all the details and can supplement that information. So if we look at the next slide, slide 14, this diagram basically shows the two types of certificates that your product may have a requirement for. So things like furniture that may not be a children's product would have a general certificate of conformity. This is a federal product safety requirement that's enforced by CPSC. The focus of this talk today is on children's products. So the bottom right one, the CPC, is probably the main one of interest. So this one requires third-party testing for all children's products, for example. And I did notice in one of the questions that came in the registration, people were asking if you have your own lab at a company, someone asked, can I produce a CPC? The key requirement here to keep in mind is the third-party testing. So by that, it has to be external and sort of what we would view as a neutral party. So you probably would have to make a contract with a separate entity. If it's a GCC, your own lab, given that it meets certain lab accreditation features and does the documentation in a certain way, would fully meet the requirements of a GCC, but not for CPSC. It must be third-party CPSC accepted and an accredited lab. Next slide, please. So who's responsible for issuing the certificates? In the context, most of you guys are outside of the US, my understanding. So generally, it would be the importer would be subject to the CPSC requirements that they're responsible. A third-party lab, such as Carlos's, can help you to prepare the right type of analyses and help you prepare the documentation. But you, as the importer or US manufacturer, would be the legal party held responsible. Next slide, please. So this one to mention briefly, because more details will come later in Carlos's, we provided a link here for where you can find additional information. But the chain of the wording that for the CPC, it must be third party and a CPSC accepted lab is very important. So by CPSC accepted lab, by that there is a process by which a lab will apply to us to be in our program. We have to review certain documents and certain quality criteria, and then we will designate them as one that we accept. I want to pause a moment on this aspect because there are, of course, very good third-party labs. They may be able to do a test for some of the requirements that meet the intent, but you have to be very careful because if they're not on the CPSC accepted laboratory list, we would not recognize them. And so we would not accept the results of that certificate. So you need to be mindful when you're looking at a potential vendor to help you that ask them to see, are they accepted by CPSC? Look at their documents that attest to that. Next slide, please. So this slide basically just shows you on our website with lab search as the key word here. You can hop on the website and find the list for your particular country or city where there are CPSC accepted testing labs. So for example, if you're in the Guangzhou area, you could look at in Guangzhou the full list for what type of tests CPSC accepts the lab. So two main criteria here, and I want to pause a moment because this is also a stumbling point for some suppliers and manufacturers. It's important that when you contract for the services, when you're preparing your certificate, not only that it's a CPSC accepted testing laboratory, but that it's accepted for the type of test that you need done. So there can be situations where a lab can be certified in analyzing lead surface content or lead content that they may not have applied for yet or still be in the process for phthalate testing. And if you submit something without the lab that's accredited, accepted for that type of test, again, you may have an issue later on. Most likely you will. Next slide, please. So this one, again, I'm just going to pass by this. This is basically saying where we say first-party testing or a qualified test facility. The main point here is that if you have a lab that meets certain ISO standards or lab quality, if you maintain the right sort of documentation, that lab would be fully acceptable for the GCC. Next slide, please. The CPC, these type of certificates, they have to accompany each shipment. They must be furnished to the distributor or the retailer, but you don't necessarily have to provide them to the ultimate consumer. Some companies choose to do barcodes or tracking ID numbers where a customer could look up that information, but the main requirement is that it be furnished to the distributor or the retailer. And the e-filing that I'll talk about in just a few minutes meets this requirement of the transmittal of the availability of the certificates. Next slide, please. This slide basically talks about some of the requirements that the content, the details don't need to be on a CPC or a GCC, but you still need to do them. And several of these, Carlos will speak about in more detail. We also have the webinar that we're doing on December 5th that will speak from CPSC perspective in more detail on these. But, they range from things with the tracking information to be adequate in terms of manufacturer ID and address so that in event of some problem, you can quickly track all that product down and kind of know exactly which product batches may have been affected, registration forms and cards, the instructional literature that may be mandated to company things, the on-product certification, the customary labeling, the things like the batteries that I mentioned earlier, that it's really important that it be in a certain format with a certain message, a lot of details there, even down to the coloring and font size. Next slide, please. So going to shift gears a little bit, but it ties into the certificates. I mentioned that you can transmit electronically the certificates. We do have a final rule for electronic filing, e-filing. It is in the process of basically being finalized and rolled out. We've been getting a lot of questions from potentially affected importers, manufacturers in terms of what it's all about. So we've included a few slides here for reference. But basically, CPSC is modernizing the way that import data is processed. Basically, we're modernizing it by, instead of a lot of paper copies that in the past had been supplied upon request or loosely with the chains between the broker and CPSC and the customs. Now we're switching for everything to be electronic filing. So this has a variety of benefits. As the information is submitted, it will be a lot quicker to review. There will be sort of more streamlined process in terms of a consistent set of information provided to customs and CPSC. And some companies that are doing a lot of volume or repeated shipments should find it easier to work off of templates and consistently pull in certain data fields that they may use over and over, whereas the other more paper-based systems in the past tended to require a lot of repetitive type of entry. So we think this can represent a good win-win in terms of enabling CPSC to review things quicker, to have more consistent, timely information, to review things before they arrive to port. And hopefully for the companies also a benefit where it will be easier to prepare and easier to, over time, maintain the records. Next slide, please. So here it basically just lays out in a visual some of the main benefits that I mentioned. On the bottom right, you'll see about fewer holds to check for certificates, reduction in risk score. So we do expect over time that basically this electronic system will enable us to focus on the shipments of the greatest risks. If, for example, a company has repeated issues with the certificates that they presented us in terms of not being CPSC accredited or fraud issues or just violations that may have happened even if there is some sort of certificate, then that information basically feeds into the system. And chances are more likely that those type of companies will get greater scrutiny in the future. If a company has many shipments without issues, then we're probably as an agency going to feel like they'll have a lower risk score, sort of a trusted trader type situation where, given our limited resources and the limited inspections that we can do of the containers each year, they may probably be given over time lesser priority than the other situation that I mentioned. Next slide, please. Who must be certified or what must be certified? Basically, if your product requires a certificate, then you need to do this process. That's really the bottom line. Next slide, please. A little bit about the timing. We began this project through some pilots several years ago. We did have some focus groups, beta pilots, to tell us, real life use cases that they're doing, what they're experiencing using it. We tried to feed that information back into the process. As I mentioned, we're really on the cusp of issuing the final. Should be coming out soon, and we then will be rolling out training and some other public information about it as well. Next slide, please. Here, this just summarizes some areas where you can find additional resources. We have a mailing list you can sign up for. If you have questions, there are certain emails that you're free to send in as well to find out more about the status, and for your particular situation if you have questions about the certificates or others. Next slide. So with that, that concludes part one. Thanks for your patience on the very first part. I'm sorry with the screen freezing issue. We did collectively rehearse, and of course things went without issue, but something happened. So the next part though, part two, as I mentioned, my colleague Carolyn's gonna take it from here and talk about case studies and some best practices. The next part though, part two, as I mentioned, my colleague Carolyn's gonna take it from here and talk about case studies and some best practices. Carolyn?
Yes, thank you, Steve. So when products do not meet the technical regulations or industry standards, products can pose a risk of injury to a consumer. At the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Office of Compliance, they investigate products to determine if a product has a defect and could injure a person, or if a product is in violation of a technical regulation. I'm going to go over some of these selected case studies that were recalled from the U.S. Commerce by our agency. Next slide. Drawstrings and upper outerwear. On this slide, there are a list of common violations we see with upper outerwear. I want to bring your attention to 3 garments. These garments were recalled because they were not in compliance with the drawstring requirement, which is no outerwear clothing can have a drawstring because drawstrings can be a potential strangulation risk. Please remember this because outerwear with drawstrings cannot enter into the U.S. If they do, they will get stopped and seized and destroyed at the U.S. ports. Next slide. Reversible clothing. Now here is a list of common problems we see with reversible clothing. We find that reversible sweatshirts are not in compliance because they are not tested correctly. So it is very important to remember that when sweatshirts are reversible, test both sides because some raised surface fabrics, such as reverse fleece, can be highly flammable. Next slide. Sheer scars are often found to be non-compliant in both silk and rayon fabrics. The photos of scars on this slide were recalled because they failed the flammability regulation. Sheer scars that fail flammability regulations are not permitted to be imported or sold in the U.S. Next slide. Children's sleepwear. Here's some general issues we find. The industry continues to struggle with categorizing children's daywear versus sleepwear garments. It is important when buying sleepwear, it is clear whether it's daywear or sleepwear because of the different testing applies. And you want to make sure the sleepwear does not fail flammability testing. Most companies want to test the product for daywear instead of sleepwear because the sleepwear test is more stringent. If not tested properly, the garment will not comply with U.S. regulations. Distinction between children's bathrobes versus pool cover-ups is another common violation we see. If it's a bathrobe, it's subject to testing. If it's a pool cover, it is not. So we want to make sure it's clear. Next slide. Footwear. It is important to know that footwear is subject to flammability requirements, particularly when they are considered hosiery, like socks. However, the common reason the agency recalls children's shoes is due to lead violations. Children's shoes are subject to the total lead content requirements. Generally, all accessible components of a children's shoe must be tested to demonstrate compliance with lead content limit of 100 parts per million. Now, metal or plastic components, such as like the shoe eyelets or the buckles, must also be tested for lead. We have seen incidents where small children who are teething have mouths on shoes, so it is important that footwear meets the lead requirements. Next slide. Do you know one of the top reasons our import surveillance stop products at the port of entry is because of lead content and also because of lead in surface paint? That is one of the top reasons. This is an issue you want to pay careful attention to, especially as it relates to children's jewelry, as we see ongoing instances of this issue of a concern. This jewelry set consists of a plastic and metal Therefore, the one that you see here that it has metal and plastic, therefore it could possibly be subject to lead in paint and content regulations. Know which products are subject to lead content versus which ones are lead in paint or which require both. Lead in paint, as a reminder, is surface coating, or is the lead baked into the product, like inherited in the product? Or is it just surface? Remember, it's 100 parts per million for content and 90 parts per million for paint. We also see some jewelry with high levels of cadmium. Now, cadmium is toxic if ingested by children and can cause adverse health effects, but we primarily recall children's jewelry because of high levels of lead. Next slide. Toys are often recalled because of small parts. A small part is an object that fits without compressing and in any orientation entirely into a small part cylinder. Here is an example that I will pass. Well, I had another picture showing the cylinder, but that's okay. There is a cylinder that we can show at a later date, but the cylinder is what represents the size of a fully expanded throat of a child under 3 years old. So it's important that the small part cylinder is used because that is what we go by to determine whether the object fits in the cylinder and is considered a small object. A small part can be a whole toy or an article, or it can be a separate part of a toy, a separate part of a game, or other article. A piece of a toy or article that breaks off during testing is also considered a small part. And it also simulates what the use and abuse of a toy is. Like when children are playing with toys, if anything can break off, we do a certain type of test to simulate that type of behavior. So if anything breaks off and it becomes a small part and can fit in that cylinder, we consider that a violation. Children's products that are intended for use by children under 3 years of old that present a choking hazard, aspiration, or ingestion hazard because of these small parts are banned into the U.S. Next slide. We have talked about our new requirements and some of the issues that can occur that causes problems and sometimes a need for a recall. Now I want to discuss how to avoid problems and prevent recalls. One of the phrases you will hear a lot at CPSC is safety by design, essentially trying to give very careful thought on the front end to designing a product that has reduced likelihood of having safety issues, and then building a process where, with careful monitoring and controls, the manufacturing of the product ensures safety. I want to discuss a bit here on how you can avoid having potential problems. Number one is simply to know what is expected, what the requirements are, and how you can best fulfill them. We recognize keeping up with requirements can be a challenge. We have listed some resources on our website, including in Chinese. Later, I'll speak about some specialized tools we have, such as our regulatory robot. Overall, safety should be a natural part of the design part. Knowing the requirements helps you get it right from the beginning. Now, once you have a safe design, controlling supply chains and keeping suppliers informed of technical regulations is critical. You are only as strong as your weakest link. Suppliers that may be unaware of the requirements or haven't kept up can cost time and money if defective or otherwise unsafe products are manufactured. A helpful tool can be to develop an in-house guide that maps out protocol for compliance with internal procedures, product standards, and CPSC technical regulations. Many companies have these, but we find many don't. Sometimes new entrants to exporting may not have them. They may be caught up in the recent hot product or trend and haven't yet caught up on establishing written procedures that will help prevent problems. CPSC has staff that can assist you with your specific situation. Our small business office has several staff to answer specific questions for your product situation. Also, sometimes upon request, our compliance or age grading office will look at a sample and give some input to you on how they would grade your product for age groups or what might be of concern. We said the importance of making sure you understand the U.S. safety regulations, but it is also important that all parts of your organization have an awareness. Ensure your design, product development, merchandising, buying, and legal teams are all aware of the relevant standards and regulations in the U.S. market. Make sure products comply. Prepare and keep on hand templates for both a general certificate of conformity, and a children's product certificate. And be sure to inspect products at each stage of production. The templates can be your own design, and you just need to ensure that you have an approach that includes the main content. And we went over that earlier. Next slide. I mentioned a regulatory robot earlier. CPSC has many tools and resources in several languages that can assist you under our regulatory robot. I would encourage viewers to be sure to check out our CPSC regulatory robot. It's available, again, like I said, in several languages such as Chinese and also Vietnamese. And we're also working on translating some information on our regulatory robot in Khmer as well. The regulatory robot is an automated tool that can help identify safety requirements for many different types of products. And many companies have also found this tool to be extremely helpful. Next slide. Well, this concludes our presentation. We thank you for your time, and we hope you found this presentation very helpful. Thank you.
If you do have any more specific CPSC questions for Steve or Carolyn, feel free to email them. Up next, we have Carlos. Carlos is a very special guest speaker from HQTS Spain office. He's located currently in Madrid. So Carlos is our compliance business development manager. He's a sales leader turned business compliance developer. He has an impressive track record for fortifying supply chains with experience working with major US companies. Carlos combines deep compliance expertise with proven strategies. He drives revenue growth by executing strategic sales plans, managing key accounts, and exceeding sales targets in B2B markets. So Carlos, I'll hand you the floor and you can share your screen.
Right. Thank you very much, Anthony. And thank you, Caroline and Steve, for sharing all that information. Give me a second here while I share my screen. Okay, so excellent. So this is the webpage. As you can see here, this is all the information that you can search for a lab. In this case, I just put HQTS here and click submit. And here are both our two labs. So we have one in Ningbo City and one in Hangzhou. So if you click on each lab, you will see here the contact information. So you will see the accreditation body and certification number. So our lab was accredited by the CNAS, which is China National Accreditation Service for Conformity Assessment. And through there, we contact the US directly with their body, and we get a certificate number. And this is the scope of the testing that we can do. So as you can see, it's lots of tests. And this is for our other lab, which is pretty much the same, but because it's a smaller lab, there isn't as much tests. And yes, that's it. I don't know if I went too fast. I'm sorry. Well, just to go through a little bit more information and what exactly a third-party service provider does in order to help you out to get the CPC. I'll be more than happy to help you out and answer any questions at the end. So I put up a little table of contents here. So we'll go through what exactly the CPC is, the products and standards, CPC for Amazon or any e-commerce that you might be interested in, testing for CPC, tracking labels, registration form, managing suppliers, and some solutions that HQTS can provide. So what exactly is the CPC? As Steve mentioned, it's the Children's Product Certificate, which I put an example here. Essentially, I'll go through each of these individually so you can understand a little bit more what exactly is on the certificate. The certificate normally comes stamped as well, and we provide it to you electronically. Going forward, as Steve mentioned, there will be a new e-filing system, and I hope HQTS can also help you through that system as well. So this certificate essentially is the proof that your products have been properly tested with a third-party approved lab, which we have to, which I will show you in a bit. So I'll go through all the parts of the CPC. So the first part essentially is the product description and applicable standards. So this is the identification of the product. As you can see here, it has the product name. This is really important because a product name has to be really specific. It can't just be a bracelet. It has to be children's bracelet for an air tag. It has to be really specific. If you're not specific, customs can retain your product, and you'll have to uh, essentially pay again to get a certificate with the correct name. Normally, what we do as a third party, we will send you a draft, and you will essentially accept the draft, double check that all the information is there, and then we will send you the final item with the certificate as well. So here's some rules and the items that are with the ASTM, of course, with the proper nomenclature for each one of these, and what we tested personally. The second part is the manufacturer and record holder information. So as you can see here, you have the manufacturer or importer and its details. So if you're a manufacturer and you're an importer, you'll put this information here, over here on the left side, as you can see here. And this is for the importer and this is for the manufacturer. So if you're an importer, you have to fill out both. If you're just a manufacturer, just fill out one. And the contact information for the individual, which maintains the records for the test results. So essentially, if I'm in contact with your procurement team, they're the ones that talk to me and said, Carlos, I would like to have this product tested, and along with the CPC, that person contact information would be here. So if anything happens at customs, they will contact that person to send over the documents or any relevant information. They also have the CPC certificate, all the tests and results, and everything related to that product. So the manufacturer details, testing details, and third-party lab details. So the date and place of the manufacturing, pretty straightforward. When was the product manufactured, the location, and the date. Essentially, it's when the product was tested and the locations where the testing occurred. And in this case, as you can see here, it's the testing information for our lab and the location as well for our lab. In this case, it was Ningbo lab, so it was in the Ningbo city, and our lab test information as well. So an example I put here is a little fluffy brown teddy bear. So as you can see here, we put the most information as possible, all the certifications that apply to this specific product, the manufacturer and importer that we just discussed before, the contact test record holder. So in this case, Lisa Lane is a compliance manager or procurement manager, director, whoever has all that information. Over here, you can see the date and place of the manufacturing and the date of testing, and the third-party lab tester, which in this case would be HUTS and our lab in Guangzhou. Okay, well, products and standards. So essentially, these are products that are generally fall under the CPSIA. As Steve mentioned, toys, kids' jewelry, art supplies, for example, maybe crayons or any type of pencils, kids' furniture, as Steve also mentioned, and books. Remember that there could be children's books. What this means is maybe don't have pointy edges, maybe round edges, maybe I don't know if you remember as a child, those books that had the pages made out of cardboard, which are a little thicker than normal pages. So believe it or not, several standards apply to different products. So the CPSIA defines children's products by the label or description of the product that says for children. If it's on a promotional video or any type of promotion that is intended for children, and if people would recognize it as a children's or kids' toys, and if it's something regularly used by children, even if it wasn't designed for them, if they regularly use it, it is defined by the CPSIA. So this is Amazon's compliance policy in a really tight nutshell. We chose Amazon because it's one of the biggest e-commerce platforms out there. So it requires sellers to prove that their products are CPSIA compliant, of course. So for this, you need to meet these safety requirements and for Amazon and have all the labels as well. So as always, Amazon tries to be on the safety net with the US safety standards. So you have to be compliant with them as well. Some e-commerce businesses have different policies, so you must adhere to them as well. So the general steps to follow in a general outline would be the third-party lab testing, which in this case would be HQTS. When we finish the testing, you will see everything is pass, all the testing, heavy metals such as lead, phthalates, it depends on the product itself, but I can help you out. If you have any questions, let me know. But we send you the lab report. After we send the lab report, we also send the CPC. You have to include the warning labels and attach the CPSIA tracking labels as well. It's pretty straightforward, but you do have to go with a third-party lab. So these are the different types of testing that you might be required. So initial certification testing, this is for a particularly new product for the market. So we test the product as a whole. Then if there are any updates to that product from your manufacturer or yourself, if you're a manufacturer, we have to do the test on those particular its component or materials. If it changes, so if there are more different metals or if anything changes at all, you have to do the lab testing again. And if there is periodic testing for a particular product as well. So this would be action figures. There has to be a periodic testing on this type of products for children. So who can provide testing? So not every lab can provide testing. Only those that are CPSC accredited can help you with a children's product. Of course, HQTS has 2 labs accredited. I will, after the presentation, I'll show you the webpage that Steve mentioned and see what information is there, so you can see where we are. So there is also CPSIA labeling. So the labels must be clear, visible, and include key details. So as you can see here, I put an example for the label, the importer, manufacturing location, the date of the product, the batch identification, the address, and phone number. So it's pretty straightforward, but it must be included. And the registration form. This rule applies to manufacturers and importers alike. So this would be for products that are for babies and toddlers, such as cribs, strollers, and high chairs. It doesn't apply to certain products, such as car seats and other children restraint systems, because these will fall under a different agency, such as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or maybe the Department of Transportation, if it applies to that. So managing suppliers. It's really important that you manage your suppliers to follow the CPSIA standards. So what we HQTS suggest is that you enforce your suppliers to follow all these standards, and also have your internal department mandate third-party testing. So as I mentioned before, everything has to go through a third party. This can cover lead content, pilots, and other safety specifications that may arise. But as many suppliers, they really don't know this information and don't know that they have to have a third-party supplier, and it has to be accredited. So in this case, you should just clearly communicate the testing protocols to suppliers, pre-approve them with qualified labs. I'll show the list in a little bit. Before everything is shipped. So once it arrives to port, you have all the information and the CPC. So how to ensure your suppliers follow the standards? Well, it's really important that you let your suppliers know that CPSIA enforces strict limits, especially on lead content, as Caroline mentioned, and other outlets, allowing no more than 0.1%, or if I recall correctly, 100 milligrams. I'm not quite sure, but Caroline knows the metric there. So the issue here is that suppliers in Asia adhere to the local standards. So they will say, well, this is good. This product is it can be sold here. Everything's fancy, but at the end of the day, it won't be allowed into the US because it has high lead content or whatnot. So with this, the solution would be to have us do the testing and provide suppliers with clear guidelines and allow them to know, like, well, supplier, these are the guidelines that the CPSIA standards are for, and you need to follow them. So please go ahead. And tackling labels and certifications. So CPSIA requires children's products to have tracking labels with production date, batch number, manufacturing details, as I showed you before. So it's just have a clear template to your suppliers and verify compliance during pre-shipment inspections, which I will talk to you about in a little bit, and certificates of compliance for all batches. So a certificate of compliance, essentially, you arrive at port and it says that this product is compliant to the market you're importing to. And regional and safety standards and consistencies. So this is again touching the point where the standards for CPSIA are different than the local regulations where the current goods are being manufactured and essentially don't comply with US requirements. So to lower the risk, just provide training on US safety standards and hire local experts or third party such as us. And we'll be more than happy to help you out. And we will contact your supplier and also help them out as well. So ensure some issues is the language barrier. So what third parties do, such as HQTS, is we as a third party, we provide a bridge between your supplier and yourself with language barriers, documentation, and any missing test reports or certificates. They might have a test report, but the test report could be from 2 years ago, and they would be just using that one. And as a third party, we'll inspect everything and we'll let you know, like, okay, this test report it's long overdue. It already expired like last year. So we'll help you out with all that, with all those inconsistencies in documentation. So some of the services and solutions that HQTS has is we can do supplier audits. So we check the legal operation, the factory ownership, business location with a simple audit. Essentially, this simple audit is so you know that the supplier is real and are not getting scammed. We also do really fundamental audits, more detailed audits that take pretty much 2 to 4 days with a personalized HQTS checklist. Or if you have your own checklist, we can also use that or combine both. We do sample verification. So we confirm that the products match your specifications. We do random sample selection. So what normally happens is that a supplier will send samples to the lab, but we'll send the best samples, you know? So what we do here is we send someone and they will collect samples physically, which will be 100% random. So that's the supplier won't be able to send the best samples to the lab. We also do product and quality inspections. So we do pre-production inspections, which essentially is we do an inspection on the raw material, where it's stored, how it's handled. We do during production inspection, during the process of manufacturing. Our inspector will go physically there and see if everything is followed, the process is followed as it should be, or if there is any contaminants added during the process. And pre-shipment inspection. So when the product is finalized, we will send an inspector to confirm that everything is packaged correctly, that all the products are there. We do random sampling, or we do piece-by-piece inspection, just to confirm depending on what your needs are or what we normally do on that. So for example, if it's a toddler textile such as socks, we check the size of the socks, the color, if it's consistent with what you ordered. And we also do container loading and unloading supervisions. So if it's a big batch, if it's something really that could be broken during transit, we will help you doing a report, taking pictures and sending your way, telling you that everything was loaded to protect the product. And well, the children's product compliance and our compliance department in general to help you navigate through the big world of compliance and certifications and standards. And of course, we also do testing. So we do ROS testing, REACH testing, CPSIA testing. We have a lot of testing, and our labs are up to the accreditations, not just in China, but globally. We component testing and material change retesting as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just give me a second. I would like to show you the webpage.
Thank you so much, Carlos. That was very, very comprehensive. I love how you went so in depth and you gave us a lot of graphical imagery in your examples. So thank you so much for that. Now we might move to the Q&A section. So the first question here is, what documentation or records, if any, should we ask exporters to provide or maintain to support us during CPSC inspections? Who would like to answer that question? For $1 million.
Well, I have some general comments from CPSC perspective, and then maybe Carlos wants to weigh in, since he may assist with his services on that. So I think obviously the certificates, you want to make sure you have really looked those over and you have a good system to maintain those. I think that's really key, and sometimes folks do a misstep there, and they don't have them handy or haven't kept them over time at the right intervals. So Carlos mentioned earlier, in terms of one of their services to kind of review for a particular product, the frequency of the testing and if it's expired or kind of too old. And I think if internally you have a system to just keep tabs of that and then consult with a company like HQTS, that's probably a best practice. I think there was a kind of related question that I saw in the registration sheet in terms of reporting as well, if something goes wrong, or if they, from a retailer perspective, if what their legal obligation is. And I think this kind of iterates the or stresses the importance of kind of maintaining good records and making sure things are up to date with your certificates. So retailers actually are legally obligated to basically obtain, review the certificates, and if there is some issue with a product that they become aware of, maybe it's already shipped or maybe it's out in the marketplace, there is a legal requirement that they basically report that to the CPSC, that there's an unsafe product potentially in commerce. And we view that as immediate reporting. And by immediate, we mean 24 hours. And if a company is kind of forthright and has maintained good records with certificates and the right frequencies, that task will be easier for them. And the situation may be less stressful and less problematic than if they have to start searching for the certificates or the information, or if it's outdated and expired. To pause a moment on the reporting requirements, this is something I think a lot of companies aren't necessarily well familiar with. There can be a tendency that to just view, well, the importer record has this headache, not me. I think that's the wrong approach, and potentially could be a very costly approach. CPSC perspective is that basically all parties that have a hand in that project and its sale and distribution are involved in some way and have certain requirements that they have to fulfill. So as a retailer e-commerce platform, for example, if you've gotten some complaints about a shock hazard, CPSC would take the perspective that you need to report that in a very timely way to CPSC as a potential risk. And then you may need to work with a testing certification labs to kind of track down retrofits or diagnose the problem as well.
I would like to add something to that. It's really important that as an importer, what frequently happens is that sole importers, if you have a company that's under your personal name, but you go for a different name, normally people put that in the company name. But when they when they import, they get stopped at the port and get everything and paused because legally it's under their personal name, not that company name. So it has to be really important that everything is under their personal name or the legal name of the import. Either it could be a company or a personal person. Just to add that because it does happen a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carlos, for adding that after Steve's comment as well. So the next question we have next is, what happens if the manufacturer or supplier checked and tell me the product complies with CPSIA, but they aren't an accredited lab? I believe that was already also covered in part of the presentation. Is there anything you guys would like to add specifically for this point?
I'd maybe just supplement what was said earlier, and I think this ties into Carolyn's best practices. From CPSC perspective, you really need to look at your due diligence or do your due diligence. So when we talk about accreditation, to actually, beyond verbal statements, look at the accreditation documents. Carlos pointed out CNAS there, who did the accreditation, and when they say, yeah, we're accredited or we're accepted by CPSC, actually look at, hop online, do your own search, do your own due diligence and see, oh, okay, yes, for my particular product, for this particular type of test, they are CPSC accepted, they're accredited. I can't tell you the number of times that we've had, when I do foreign talks, companies will say, wow, we spent a lot of money, but now we got held up at the port, and I don't understand why, because they are accredited lab. Two reasons, again, why they were probably held up. They may be accredited, but not CPSC accepted. And they may be accredited and CPSC accepted, but for a different type of test that you need done. So some of these, I'll give you an example. Just about a month ago, a company had one where they had contracted for lead content, but what they really needed was lead surface content. And that makes a difference. And so really the devil's in the details. Carlos mentioned also in terms of just the product type, the specificity, really, really important. And I would urge people to look at it up close themselves and do the due diligence.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you so much for the example, Steve, because I think something like as simple as just the wording could trip a lot of people up to get the wrong testing or getting the wrong certification and misleading them, really. So thank you so much for adding that in. The next question here is e-commerce specific. So the question goes, if I'm an e-commerce retailer and I source from a local supplier in the US, is it on me, so my responsibility as an e-commerce retailer, to ensure I sell only CPSI compliant products, or is it the local supplier's responsibility to provide me with CPSI compliant products to sell?
So in the interest of time, I won't repeat some of my earlier comments, but this ties in terms of, I guess, from an e-commerce retailer perspective. So I guess the bottom line is that, again, you need to do your due diligence, that you need as a company when you're buying stuff to ask the right questions to make sure that you're being provided with a type of product that's safe, that's certified safe, that has the right documentation. So from CPSC's point of view, you must obtain the certificates. You must actually look at them, do the due diligence. If there's a problem, you have to report it immediately. With the record keeping, there's not a legal requirement per se, but it's a best practice. But I would just emphasize that if there was some problem with that product and, the first point of contact for CPSC may be the importer or the supplier, but it all trickles down, as we say. And eventually they're going to look at whoever distributed, whoever was buying it. They're going to asks a lot of questions in terms of where you then send it. So it's really in your best interest to do the homework, and then also if there is some problem to contain it and report.
Yeah. Can I just also maybe add another layer of complexity to this question as well, Steve? Is what would happen in a situation if this particular e-commerce retailer perhaps was selling a American product or supplied from a US supplier, but they were selling in different regions. So perhaps they had not met CPSIA compliancy, but they were able to meet other compliance in, say, for example, Europe, and they were able to sell the product in Europe, but without the compliance locally in the US, if they were to not sell in the US, but the supplier may face, say, issues or sanctions on their end. As the e-commerce retailer, do they get any whiplash for purchasing a CPSIA non-compliant product, even though they're not selling in the US?
That's an interesting question. It has a lot of nuances. So our main preoccupation for us is what's entering commerce in the US. Right. Having said that, there's probably a lot of specifics in your question that really a CPSC lawyer should probably look at to respond with the legalese. I will say, though, more and more, because of the nature of e-commerce, we're having strong ties with other jurisdictions. So we work quite a bit with the European Union. We have ongoing dialogues with Mexico and Canada. Although our preoccupation is with what's entering commerce in the US, we do at times send notes, just as one brief example, to Canada. For example, if something is stopped at our port because we view it as an unsafe product or a banned product, sometimes some importers, they'll try to sell it in Mexico or they'll try to sell it in Canada because those are our closest neighbors. We inform them that, this product, let's say nursing or an inclined sleep product, this is banned in the US. We saw these shipments here. Our understanding is that it's now being sent to Canada, just so you know, and inform your customs people, here's the information. So more often than not, a lot of the safety standards, a safe product is viewed safe in a variety of jurisdictions. If it's unsafe, a shock hazard, or just a bad design, selling it elsewhere is probably going to be problematic and not a good practice.
Yeah.
But let me ask Carolyn if she wants to add anything to that from the compliance hat.
No, you pretty much covered it. I mean, it's just we're concerned about what comes into the U.S. commerce, but we have worked with other jurisdictions on a recall. It may have been deemed hazardous in another country, and we know that it's sold here. We may work with the company to see if they've had any incidents or injuries associated with their product, and then, in conjunction, do a recall or stop sale. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. I understand that question may be a little bit of a stab at the dark right there. We'll move on to another question now, and this is probably more directed at Carlos, but I think we've already covered a bit of this. I'll read out the question, and Carlos, let me know whether or not there's anything you want to add. Number one is HQTS an accredited lab? Which is yes. And what does it mean to be CPSC accredited?
What does it mean to be a CPSC accredited laboratory? That means when it's a laboratory is accredited by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission when it's been accepted to perform the third-party testing for children's products. So laboratories, they will undergo a full audit that covers all aspects of their operation, including the quality and testing and personnel. So once they go through that process, they can be considered a third-party testing laboratory, accredited laboratory by CPSC.
Yeah, and this audit is continuous. It's not a one-time thing,
Yes.
just so you know.
Yes, that's true. That's true, Carlos.
Yeah, I wish it was. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's a continuous process, and as always, there's always room for improvement on our side as well.
Mhm.
So always try to better our processes and everything. But yeah, you can go
Fantastic.
on with the next question.
Great. And the next question here says, if a product fails a CPSIA test at HQTS, can you assist with corrective actions, or is it just reporting to us to find our own solution?
Yeah, we can definitely help you out. We can help out both our client and the supplier. So if it's something, we can give them different types of solutions. And if one of these solutions involves more services from us, for example, having an engineer during the process, the manufacturing process, to know if and identify if there's any contaminants getting into the process while creating the product, we can help out. We can help with inspections. We can help with other types of audits. So we can definitely help out. And we can do a retest. And just so the audience knows, retesting costs a lot less than the original test. So they can do several retests if need be. Fortunately, there won't be any need for a retest, but if that happens, we can do a retest as well.
Okay. And this is a good question now, as well. They're all good questions, but this comes really well timed, because this question asks, as a manufacturer, am I able to create my own testing lab or department and become accredited?
I can answer that. I mean, there are a lot of manufacturers that have their in-house laboratories or in-house testing, I would say. But in order to be accredited, accepted laboratory, as Carlos and I said, there's a process. So if there are products that you're testing that aren't children's products or don't require a third-party testing, then maybe you can do in-house testing. But if you would like to do manufacture children's products, it's better to go through the accreditation process in order to be considered a accepted accredited lab.
Understood. Then move to the next question as well. Are any textile products, for example, natural fiber-based products, exempt from certain CPSIA testing requirements?
There are some exempted fabrics under the clothing textiles 16 CFR 1610. They're like some plain surface fabrics that are greater or equal to a certain number of grams that are considered exempted. There are certain natural fibers, blends, fibers that are exempted. I don't have them all at my fingertips now, but some sheep, llama. I mean, there's some different types of blends and fibers that can be considered exempted. Yeah, absolutely. And the lab can work with you on that, as well as resources on our webpage through our regulatory robot.
Fantastic. So yeah,
Yes.
for the person, for the audience that asked that question, you can always find more information through the CPSIA regulatory robots. I think they can find that through your website. Is that right, Carolyn?
Yes.
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 Fantastic. Great. And now for the final question. For small scale manufacturers or startups, are there reduced compliance requirements or support programs available?
That's a good question, and Steve can certainly opine on this as well. In general, we consider all manufacturers and importers of children's products must have their products third-party tested. There are some allowances for what we call small batch manufacturers. They may be provided some kind of relief from third-party testing, but for certain children's product safety rules. So again, that's information you can also obtain from our website. We have a small business page that will provide information on a list of what categories of those rules that could possibly give a small batch manufacturer some relief. But the company would have to also apply to be a small batch manufacturer in order to receive that kind of relief. Steve, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that says it. I think maybe the takeaway point is the types of tests really don't change whether you're big or small, but the frequency of them may, because we recognize that the testing is an additional business expense. And so the intent is to try to, as Carolyn said, batch things, or maybe the frequency becomes less. But the nature of what you need to test for what remains the same.
Great. Okay. Well, that concludes our Q&A section. All the questions we've received has now been answered. And I'm sure everyone really enjoyed the presentation in itself. I found it very informative myself. I was like, oh, that's new. I didn't actually think that was a thing. So I've definitely learned a lot, no doubt. So we'll probably just conclude the webinar here as is. I do want to thank you, a special thank you to Steve and Carolyn for joining us as guests and VIP guests, exclusive guests today on this live webinar. And Carlos as well. I know it's your time off now in Spain, probably cutting into your dinner time. So thank you so much for participating. To conclude the webinar, we will send through the recording of this webinar to any registrants that weren't able to make live. We do understand that most people register for these webinars purely for the recording. And the live streams will end, and we'll send any materials and share any materials from this webinar after we conclude. So thank you all for joining. And yeah, this is a goodbye, I guess.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.